"2021 welcomed Kentucky's first top-tier pro sports team in 45 years. Racing Louisville FC's inaugural season was filled with turmoil. The club fired its first head coach in Christy Holly in August of 2021. At the time, all Racing said was that Holly was fired for cause, giving no more details due to a non-disclosure agreement with Holly. But an independent investigation into the National Women's Soccer League and United States Soccer Federation detailed more. According to that report, Racing fired Holly for allegedly sexually assaulting former Louisville defender Aaron Simon. It started before the two came to Louisville, as Simon played for Holly at what was Sky Blue FC. Following that, the report states she trained with him. That's when he started inappropriately touching her and sending her sexual messages. Later, leading up to Louisville, the investigation says he showed her pornography at his home after inviting her over to study game film. And then while with Racing, the report states he had another private film session with her in a suite at Lynn Family Stadium, touching her every time she messed up in the game film. Now, one current Racing player in Amina Ekic, 6 former ones, and a former staff member allege Racing's front office fostered an environment to allow other abuses and did not sufficiently address them. It started from the beginning, which hurt a hometown hero.
Could professional women's soccer have a home here in Louisville?
Fantastic day in this organization's history.
As Racing Louisville FC made its NWSL debut.
I was genuinely so excited for this opportunity. Stay in my hometown, build something in my hometown, be there from the start, the very beginning of the club, to build something great.
Racing Louisville FC selects Amina Ekic from the University of Louisville.
It had to escalate to the worst possible thing for us to be sitting here and talking about it, recognizing that everything that's happened and what the club did was wrong.
Racing hired Holly based on recommendations from Sky Blue FC, as well as those from U.S. Soccer. Sky Blue did not publicly mention a relationship with a player who would become Holly's wife or his patterns of abuse as reasons for parting ways. Former Louisville captain Michelle Betos now plays for Gotham, which was Sky Blue, and had 4 former players say Holly was inappropriate with them.
I thought it was about his wife. They were like, no. And I mean, I wasn't even searching for those answers.
Bryn Sebring had worked with OL Reign for 4 years before joining Racing as director of player experience. Another league administrator sent her a cryptic warning.
You need to be careful with Christy. What he did before was terrible. And I remember being like, what are they talking about? Christy was a stunning manipulator.
2 former Sky Blue staff members also contacted former Racing forward Vanessa Cara.
I was warned not to go because he is a liar and creates a very bad culture. If I knew the degree to those words, I wouldn't have gone. So, it's like your dream, or is he really that bad? And the answer is yes, he really was.
Cara and others started to notice that environment when the club held its trial period for players to try out and earn a contract. Bryn Sebring, who had spent 4 years with OL Reign before joining Racing, says how Racing approached this trial period was wrong. According to Sebring, trial players are evaluated within 1 to 2 weeks from the start of preseason camp, since they are not paid or given medical benefits. Betos, a veteran who helped negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement, says Racing did not provide trial players housing or meals.
And the way Racing handled that in 2021 was extremely different from anything I think any other club was doing and any experience I've ever been a part of. We didn't sign any trial players until April 5th, which was 4 days before the first game of the season, and it was 9 weeks after players had started training with us.
Sebring said the club knew early who it wanted to keep and cut, yet Holly and the club strung players along.
They were given really elusive feedback and given the impression that they could earn contracts.
Cara says Holly promised trial players they would know their fate after a 10-day period.
And then our trial period went on from a month after those 10 days, a month longer. So it was just nonsense. And the way they wage those contracts over our heads.
This is wrong. These players are being misled, they're being manipulated, they're being treated terribly.
The new CBA says trial players must now be provided housing and meals, as well as a weekly stipend for transportation. Betos and Sebring say this change reflects what happened at Racing. Despite the issues, Kara earned a contract, but still did not trust Holly. How he and the staff treated her negative reaction to medication for a benign brain tumor confirmed that.
And I was feeling really off, had a horrible headache for probably a whole week. And it was the same week that I signed my contract. He was playing into the fact that, like, basically belittling my problem, saying, oh, now that I have a contract, I'm not going to work hard.
According to our interviews, Holly's control extended to form a problematic power dynamic with former racing director of high performance, Brianne Brown. She left Louisville after one season to work as a strength coach for the University of Pittsburgh and now holds a similar position at the University of Miami. Some players we spoke to claimed their partnership worked to mistreat some injuries. Former racing defender Julia Ashley noticed something wrong with her hamstring.
I felt it just kind of give out on me. And then a couple of days later, having me sprint. And I've never dealt with a hamstring injury before. And I'm obviously completely entrusting in the staff. And so I sprint and during training, and I definitely made it worse.
Holly and Brown then met with Ashley to talk about handling health issues.
You have to trust us. We can't have this mistrust going on here. And I was just pretty thrown off because I completely trusted them.
Ashley said she then suffered an Achilles injury leading up to the regular season. Following that, she refused to train, but said Brown forced her to, which ended with Ashley crying and screaming off the field.
No one even looked at me, anything. It was as if what I was doing was fake. And that I was able to play, but just didn't want to.
After traveling to her native New Jersey for a Challenge Cup match, Ashley consulted her high school athletic trainer in Jason Kalo. He works with high school and college athletes as the Verona Board of Education's head athletic trainer and previously worked for the National Football League's New York Giants.
From ACL, meniscus, MCL, ankle sprains, Achilles strains, you name it, she's had it, just with her level of what competition she competed against. She had a good amount of injuries, a long-standing customer of mine.
Ashley walked Kalo through the injury and what the racing staff was saying.
They thought it wasn't as serious of an injury as it was. I felt like she was kind of getting pushed into playing.
He said that, have you gotten an MRI on this? And I was like, no, I'm not really allowed to. MRIs weren't a thing last year unless you were a big time player at the club. Or they paid a lot of money to get you. And he said, well, you definitely have some micro tears.
She kind of might in turn rupture it if she kind of continued playing. So I told her that, and she kind of, I don't want to say she was surprised because she knew she was hurt. For her to come see me or at any point in time, she's hurt.
She then called a racing trainer to inform them and was then met with a call from Holly.
He is just screaming, laying into me, asking why on earth I would go to someone else and how could he possibly have an opinion on this without having a medical scan. And then the next game I end up dressing. So I dressed for a game where I can barely put my feet in cleats at this point.
Former racing forward Taylor Otto shared a similar experience. It started with a preseason hamstring injury that Brown or Holly did not help much with.
Christy essentially told the staff and that I'd never really played at a high level and had to work that hard as I am here, and that's why I got injured, and it was expected for me to be injured.
Later, Otto had issues with her right knee, where she previously tore an ACL and underwent meniscus repairs. The staff initially denied her an MRI, but eventually ordered one after she explained those past injuries. Otto said Holly was fuming since she would not dress for the next match, and she had to have surgery.
He wouldn't speak to me. And he got in front of the whole group and said that my agent told him that training was too hard and he's too hard on me. And so he wouldn't speak to me for a few weeks. And then eventually he had a meeting with me and James O'Connor.
Otto says O'Connor told her she could tell her agent whatever she wants, but that he could see both sides.
He took Christy's side on everything.
Brooke Hendricks also said she was denied an MRI for an ankle issue from a previous injury. The defender detailed Holly's reaction.
He just, got in my face, told me he couldn't trust that I was going to play well, so he wasn't sure if he was going to start me or not, all this stuff. And I just, from that point, I feel like I couldn't ask about my injuries.
The Yates report mentioned Holly having a problematic relationship with a staff member. Ashley, Hendricks, and Sebring say that staff member was Brown.
The environment that Christy and Bree created was the most toxic environment I've been a part of. It was Bree and Christy against the world.
The two of them had a lot of control over all the players in many different ways. Training issues to things in the weight room, to our nutrition and how things were being handled, to us not being allowed to consume Gatorade because of sugar.
Sebring says she tried to inform the club of Holly and Brown's relationship.
I brought concerns about the environment to the club prior to it escalating to me thinking it was an inappropriate relationship. And then when it escalated to me thinking that, I also brought that to them. And they investigated, and they also couldn't find proof. But it was during that investigation that they discovered the details of Chrissy's abuse of the player.
But the players who spoke to WHAS 11 say they informed the front office of a harmful environment well before it added up to sexual assault. The Yates report describes a meeting between 3 players and the racing front office. 2 emails Julia Ashley provided to WHAS 11 revealed the players to be her, current racing defender Emily Fox, and former Louisville midfielder Noelle Higginson. They represented the team's concerns, which were many.
The three of us were a little nervous to go in, and we wanted to make sure that we were bringing up like the main major points, because at that point, to be honest with you, there were so many.
The trio met with club president James O'Connor and human resources director Aaron Wilkins. Scheduling a later follow-up meeting, Wilkins carbon copied the 3 players on an email chain with Holly, O'Connor, assistant athletic trainer Megan Fernandez, and chaplain Garrett Bates. This revealed the players' identities.
Obviously, at that point, like, trust was broken, and I had asked HR like what happened there. We had talked about this, and she claimed that she didn't know how to blind copy.
It's like a horrible like violation of confidentiality, and kind of started this culture of we have nowhere safe to go because nobody believes our word.
And when we all sat down that meeting, you could feel the tension, and if you said the wrong thing, you didn't know what was going to happen.
And it comes back and bites. You get in trouble. And those girls did get punished for getting pulled out of different drills afterwards.
Ultimately, it came down to quite literally having no one to go to whenever a concern came up within the organization.
Sebring and the players say Holly's power and the club's enabling of it allowed him to treat anyone how he wanted.
I actually realize so much now how manipulative he was before any of it even started. I can see now how early on, before I'd even put a name to the face of most of the girls on the team, that he was already planting in my head and other veterans' heads, but also like coaches, other staff, what these players were like. So that when they did speak up, when they did have an issue, when they did say something, you almost fell back on that initial impression.
Hendricks was a confidant for Simon and would accompany her to feel safer around Holly. In response, Hendricks said Holly tried to damage her character.
I just felt so helpless.
One time, Brooke literally asked to do running after training, and the sports scientist was like, why do you always want to do extra? Like, you don't need to do extra, you're a center back. They went inside, and the staff members were completely unprofessional about it and were talking about Brooke and saying that she was a kiss ass, a try hard.
So he was trying to make my word not matter. So I didn't have a voice either. So it was just, it was horrible being in that spot, knowing what was happening, caring about my friend.
Their friendship was similar to Kara and former racing forward Jorian Balcom's. Balcom claims Holly made multiple inappropriate jokes and remarks regarding her appearance, especially outside of work. That's where Kara tried to support her.
And I would always stay next to her, kind of like how Brooke always stood next to Aaron, and I'd always be next to Dorian and be like, just as kind of like a buffer. but it was always really uncomfortable and wildly inappropriate to be commenting on what she was wearing and how she looked.
Once I stopped feeding into that or giving what he wanted, that's when he flipped a switch. And then it's almost as if the assistant staff followed suit. Like whatever Christy did, that's how the coaching staff would act.
Balcominato specifically mentioned problems with two former Racing staff members, Gary Kernine and Clifton Bush. Kernine was a Racing assistant coach who transitioned to being a tactical analyst for Louisville City FC in 2022. Bush was a volunteer coach at Racing for one season. Balcom detailed interactions with both, starting with Kernine.
He constantly made an example out of me. He would be screeching, yelling. At one point during the beginning of the year, he got so close into my face, screaming about how terrible I was doing in some drill.
Jorian wouldn't even be in training half the time. And the assistant coach said some very not nice things to her.
It's almost like I was a scapegoat for him to yell at or to get his frustration and anger out.
Otto also said she had issues with Kernine.
Christy would one day be like, oh, you're going to do amazing things. And he said this to multiple people as well. And then the assistant coach one day would be like, yeah, you're not going to make it in this league. After 2 years, there's no way you're going to be in this league anymore. Like, I mean, it was so hot and cold. It was so hot and cold. You never knew what you were going to get.
Balcom says Bush also verbally abused her.
I was told I'm not a proper pro, in quote. When I'm on this field, there's not 11 players out there. When I'm on the field, it's like there's only 10. At the rate I'm playing, my career is going to be done by next year. I don't have my priorities straight. It's just the small things that build up until you finally hit your breaking point.
I think that's why all of us struggle to even like get up in the morning and come into the facility.
Like, I don't think there was ever just 1 week where you were like, wow, I'm happy, I'm relaxed, things are fine here. And that's kind of scary to say out loud.
The player I left at was one, deflated, like didn't feel whole, didn't feel worthy to even like really speak up about anything. And like playing wise, I was just like such a worse player by the end of that year. And like, that's just so sad because I had worked so long and given up so much to get to that point. I've gone through 3 ACL tears and, you know, kept coming back to get to my dream. And then, you know, I got to my dream and was like, this really can't be it.
Racing Louisville FC cited a non-disclosure agreement and respecting Aaron Simon's privacy for its lack of details regarding Christy Holly's firing. The initial release announcing that was only 4 sentences long, stating he was fired for cause. Everyone we spoke to does not think the club did enough.
We're just like continuing to be part of the problem. There are like many ways around that in protecting Aaron, which was everyone's goal.
You can say what he's done without who he did it to. He was able to walk away free with nothing happening.
I had existed in this league where so many bad things had happened and nothing happened to the coaches. When I found out that the club found out he did to Aaron and then fired him right away, I was like very impressed because I was like, okay, something bad happened. It was reported. They did something about it. And in retrospect, like, that is such a sad opinion because of course that's what should have happened.
The Yates report stated Racing did not cooperate with the investigation, with the club producing 41 documents. Racing issued a letter from O'Connor on October 5th, which was released as we were conducting a group Zoom interview for this story.
The U.S. Soccer released Sally Yates' report, which was published earlier this week, served as a harsh reminder that appointing Christy Holly as Racing Louisville FC's first coach was a mistake. We have learned from that mistake, and we apologize to Aaron Simon, to our players past and present, and to our fans. We commend Aaron for her bravery in coming forward as part of U.S. Soccer's investigation. And while our former coach was terminated within 24 hours of us being alerted to the behavior, we know that wasn't enough and that we failed our locker room by creating a space where this behavior could occur. We have worked hard every day since then to ensure a safe environment that puts players in a position to succeed. This includes implementation of club-wide anonymous reporting services and a reevaluated hiring process for staff. We are not the same club that we were in August of 2021. We now owe it to our players and community to prove it.
What Aaron went through was unimaginable, but it hurts me that she had to put her name out there and she had to tell the whole world what happened to her and what she experienced for this club to apologize. And not even really apologizing, in my opinion. They're apologizing they got caught.
What still irritates me is that James and Racing will not say that Aaron was sexually abused and that Christy Holly was a predator. When we went into that meeting that night knowing about Christy getting fired, we were told that it was because of an inappropriate relationship. I'm sorry, but that's not a relationship. He sexually abused her and he preyed on her and did what he did. That needs to be addressed. And if they're saying they commend Aaron, they need to personally apologize to her.
What Aaron did and how she stood up and has come through and said everything that's happened to her is incredible. That was the breaking point.
We could still be sitting here with nothing being addressed if it didn't get to the worst case scenario, which was sexual assault.
As former director of player experience, Sebring says she did not do enough to stop any of this, adding no one did. But she feels that statement proves the club has failed to recognize its own failure.
After August 2021 that Racing Louisville refused to participate in the Yates investigation. Is that Christy's fault too? It just seems to minimize the extent of what happened and what has happened since. And it just felt hollow and not enough.
So 3 days after that letter was released, Racing's players wrote their own. The systemic abuse that has plagued this league for far too long is both infuriating and unacceptable. No human being should ever feel unsafe in their work environment. The fact that this abuse and harassment occurred within our club is an unimaginable horror. We expect the club's full cooperation in the ongoing investigation, as silence is no longer an option. Shortly after that, the club responded with another statement. Quote, "We will fully cooperate with the NWSL-NWSL-PA joint and independent investigation, pledging to provide the materials and access needed to complete the process. The NWSL and NWSL Players Association joint investigation is looking into anyone who failed in response to inappropriate conduct towards players. The NWSL-PA says it has independence and oversight to eventually lay out steps to move forward." On October 21st, 2022, Racing announced it would hire a general manager to oversee operations, but did not mention James O'Connor. WHAS 11 is told he will stay as president of Soccer Holdings, which owns both Racing and Lou City. But once the GM is hired, he will have no direct involvement in Racing's operations. All former Racing players and Sebring feel strongly about O'Connor's future.
I don't think he has any business being a part of that organization whatsoever anymore.
When people repeatedly came to him with different concerns of verbal abuse, of a manipulative environment, of cultural issues, he chose to kind of play either a neutral ground or sided with staff.
No one felt safe enough to go and speak to him anymore.
Ekich and Otto, who also spent some time with Racing in 2022, did mention some improvements. Otto said current head coach Kim Bjorkegren is more respectful towards players. Simon actually didn't leave Racing until June of 2022.
But it was also kind of we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about last year. We didn't talk about Aaron.
It was kind of like a joke almost, like last year was just such a disaster that because this year's not a complete disaster, it's way better.
In a letter to season ticket holders, Racing said it provided access to anonymous reporting as well as training for abuse awareness and prevention. It claims it worked with the NWSL to also improve the vetting process for hires. The club will add an assistant coach, update policies, form an internal committee to meet with players, and hold town hall meetings with fans. Racing was the only party to respond to requests for comment for this special report. It repeats those steps it is taking and partly says, quote, "We are fully cooperating with the NWSL-NWSL-PA joint and independent investigation. We will refrain from commenting on U.S. Soccer's Yates report to protect the ongoing investigation's integrity. We are committed to building a positive work environment where athletes can flourish. Racing Louisville FC and Soccer Holdings are pledging to positive change that addresses any workplace concerns, improves our culture, and allows athletes to achieve their full potential. The club is striving to build an inclusive, safe environment which makes players and fans proud." Moving forward, Beto says anyone involved or with any knowledge of abuse anywhere in the league must be held accountable.
These things happened at other places, and then that information isn't passed on. And that's half the problem, because not only do they do it once, but then they get to go somewhere else and do it again. And don't just speak to the 90-minute players, and don't just speak to the 0-minute players. Speak to players of every kind from these teams.
And then once a coach is there, having feedback from the players after the year, and it being an actual safe place to do so.
This wouldn't have happened if players hadn't spoken up, and not just like spoken up, but like not let it go.
Some feel racing could still be successful in Louisville if there is real effort towards change.
Racing Louisville, it has things that clubs in the NWSL dream of. I think the city deserves to have a team. They are such great stewards of the women's game.
That's exactly what the hometown hero in Ekich still wants Louisville professional soccer to be.
I think it's just tough to see because like this is my home. We deserve better. Past, present racing players deserve better. I think the little boys and girls who want to play for Racing City, they deserve better. And I think it starts here and it starts with us to do that for them.
Of course, you can read our full investigative report on WHAS11.com. For producer Michelle Zelli, photojournalist Alyssa Newton, and the rest of my colleagues at WHAS 11, I'm Tyler Griever. Thanks for watching.